Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. It's been a week, my friend. I can't wait to tell you all about it. We have not connected very much, and lots to share with you. So it's going to be a fun one. This week we go back to 1998 rather, as we check out Angra's Fireworks album, which actually celebrating the 24th anniversary of this album, as it was released on July 14th of 1998. But before we talk about all things Angra, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I listened to this album I thought I was only going to listen to it like one time, and it was so fascinating listening to it again for the first time in so long that I ended up listening to it a bunch of times. And I had mentioned to you earlier today that I don't know that I would have ever thought to go back and just listen to this whole thing start to finish, if not for this podcast. And I think that kind of speaks to the whole reason we started doing this in the first place, is kind of to take a break from trying to keep up with all the new stuff and kind of remember that there's, some of this older stuff out there. And it's one thing to go back and do Angels Cry and Holy Land, which are all time great albums. But I don't think Fireworks really gets talked about in that same vein. So it's kind of, fun to go back and talk about maybe these lesser appreciated albums by these stalwart bands like Angra. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I honestly pretty much just listen to video game music podcasts and Fireworks and the new Majestica single, and that was pretty much my music experience of the last week.
I don't know if we have ever talked about this album, and I think it's going to be a really interesting look back, because I'm not sure we have the same opinion on this thing, and I'm really curious to hear, I guess your thoughts. But before we talk all things Angra, you talked about the new Majestica single. You are the resident Majestica fan. What did you think?
I liked it. I don't know that I absolutely loved it. I've listened to it 3 times. A lot of people are likening the intro to the song to a modern day I Want Out, which I didn't really notice. And now that they mention it, I can't unhear it. But it's a solid tune. I like it because I'm pretty much going to like anything. I'm a fan of Tommy going back to his time, being the mastermind behind Rainseed. This is essentially what Majestic is at this point. But it's good. It's just a very high energy, fun power metal song. It's not my favorite song that they've done since they became Majestica, but again, I've only listened to it a couple of times. I'm sure it will continue to grow on me, and it'll probably be a fun song to hear live. But it wasn't really anything I was not expecting. There seemed to be a little bit of a Sabaton vibe in the chorus, which I guess you can't really blame, considering that Tommy just spent the last several years as part of Sabaton. So what about you? What did you think? I know you had a chance to listen to it.
I saw a lot of mixed reviews like you did. I saw a lot of people saying it was kind of derivative of other things, I Want Out being one of them. I saw a lot of people praising it, the mighty return of Majestica. I liked it. I thought it was a good power metal song. I don't think it's going to be my song of the year. I just enjoyed it for what it was. And I thought that Tommy sounded great. I thought it was packed with melodies. Listen, I don't think people should fool themselves. Power metal, largely derivative over the last 40 years. I mean, the reality is it is, a lot of these riffs are used. A lot of these drum patterns are used. Obviously, a lot of the vocal melodies can be the same. So I don't fault a band for putting it mildly, borrowing or even using it, inspired riffs that have stood the test of time.
I even saw some comparisons to Out in the Fields by Gary Moore. And I know that Tommy's a big fan of Gary Moore. He has a ton of tribute videos that he's done on his YouTube to Gary Moore, so that makes sense. But continue what you were saying. I just wanted to
just long. I mean, the reality is, I thought it was a good song. I think the album, if this is any indication, will be a good album, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. And I don't say this to rub it in. I'm really looking forward to their live set on 70,000 Tons. That is going to be a highlight of the trip for me. I'm sure we'll talk more about 70K as we get closer. But this is a band that I never thought would ever play in the vicinity of where I was. So I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
I don't think, did we mention the name of the song? The name of the song?
No, I don't think we did.
A New Beginning. I don't know if there's like a new album on the horizon, or if this is. I think there is, but it doesn't seem like there's like a release date or anything like that just yet. But I'm hoping before the end of the year.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. It seems like it is certainly time for some new music from them. So here's to that. A couple of other things came out this week as well on different sides of the spectrum. One that I heard, and the other which apparently just dropped, and I almost paused the podcast because of this one. And I say that because I really want to hear this song. Daniel Kavanagh from Anathema, a band we have not talked about on the podcast, but a band that I am a huge fan of. Daniel Kavanagh has opened or formed a new band aptly titled Weather Systems, obviously inspired from the Anathema album by the same name, but he has released a new song under this moniker called Do Angels Sing Like Rain? And it is the first single from an album which is due out on, I believe, September 27th. I am extremely curious to hear this album. It's called Ocean Without a Shore. I don't know if he can match the pageantry or the emotion that is Anathema, but I am all for trying, and I look forward to hearing it. And as soon as we get off of this podcast, I'm going to go listen to that song because I'm so curious. That's something that was just released. Regardless of how good it is, I will post it this week. And a completely different type of song, Destruction, the German thrash metal band that is really one of the big four in Germany when it comes to thrash, has released a cover called aptly, Fast as a Shark, which obviously everyone knows is an Accept song. This is part of a new 2-track vinyl called No Kings, No Masters. I have to assume this is the B-side, or maybe both sides are tribute to another artist. I don't know. But it was really cool to hear this thrash metal band play some old Accept stuff. Obviously, a lot of bands have covered this song. I think Halloween might have even covered this song at some point. So it is a song that many people are familiar with, whether it be the original or some iteration thereof. But hearing the Destruction cover was pretty awesome. So I'll post that this week as well.
That sounds good. I had not heard that, so I will keep an eye out for that when it gets posted.
Nice. And with that, I think we should talk about some Angra. I'm going to set the table for this album in a way that I think is the most apt comparison I can make. Fireworks for Angra is what Chameleon was for Halloween. And I say that because here's a band that had a classic power metal sound, with Angel's Cry and Holy Land, and then things came to a head with their next release, and lo and behold, the band would change singers, change other members as well, which we'll get to. And when the band came back, as Halloween did with Master of the Rings, they came back with a monster release, Rebirth, again aptly named, after a number of lineup changes. And I look forward to covering that at some point in the future. But this is one of those albums which just feels out of place in terms of the pantheon of the band. That being said, I think our impressions of this album, even going back to it now 26 years later, are going to be wildly different. And I look forward to diving deep. But I want to hear your thoughts on that comparison and whether you think that's a fair one.
I don't know that I would make that comparison, for the reason being that I don't think that this album was derided quite nearly as much as Chameleon. While I do get the connection that you're going for here, where it's kind of like almost like a bridge album between like two classic eras, and I would say even like, Holy Land being the prior album and Rebirth being the album after are two of the most well-liked Angra albums and two of the most well-liked, power metal albums ever released, I would argue. And this one kind of just falls in between. It's a time where I think there's like creative differences in the band. So there's parts to your comparison to Chameleon that I definitely see, but I think as far as like I don't think that the musically strayed as far from Holy Land as much as Chameleon strayed from like the Keeper era. I also don't think that the album was as nearly as poorly received as Pink Bubbles and Chameleon were for Halloween. So I'll try to think of what I think might be a more apt comparison, at least like from a commercial. Commercial is probably the wrong word because we're talking about Angra in 1998. But just from like a review, kind of like just how the album was received by by fans and reviewers and stuff. I mean, there's 8 reviews on metalarchives.com and it averages 84% out of 100, which I would be shocked if Chameleon even is close to that. And like even the lowest review is like a 7 out of 10, which isn't really a terrible ranking. So this album, I remember getting it and it was a big deal because like for me at the time it was my first Angra album that was like a new album, a new release. Like I went back in time to listen to Angels Cry and Holy Land, but when Fireworks came out, it was like, all right, I'm on the metal train now. And I remember I got the Japanese copy of it with the bonus track. It was arguably one of the first Japanese imports I ever bought. Although I think my Holy Land copy was also Japanese as well. Loved my Japanese Angra discs, but anyway.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with anything you just said. I guess when I talk about the comparison, it's a change in eras and a departure in whole or in part from their original sound. Obviously, Chameleon is the complete antithesis of some of that early Halloween material. No questions asked. If Fireworks may as well be Angels Cry Part 2 compared to Chameleon. I get that. But it is still I think it's a stark contrast. And although it was not poorly received at the time, I don't think anybody was saying, my God, this is even better than Holy Land. So, like,
no, I agree with that.
It was most people, dare I say everyone, had said this was a step down, if not more. But we'll get to that because
it was a hard album to follow. It was a hard 2 albums to follow. Just for information's sake, we covered Angels Cry, our 5th episode ever. I gave Angels Cry a 10, which I have not given a ton of albums a 10, but I stand by that. You gave it a 9.5, and then and
I might be low in that. If thinking about it, that seems we were still finding our footing with the rankings at that point. In retrospect, it's a 9. It probably again, and I don't know that I've listened to it since then. I should say that, but I think that it's probably a 9.75. I'm not going to amend the score, but I think it's probably a 9.75 or a 10 because how do you get better than Angels Cry? But
right.
Anyway.
And then Holy Land we did in January of last year, and I gave that a 9.75, and you gave that a 9.5 as well.
And I think that's a fair score.
What I'm saying is that these are 2 really highly regarded albums, at least by us, but I think by others as well. So, like, even if Fireworks was a 9 out of 10, it's still a step down from those 2 albums. Sure. I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that like that those were 2 of the best, first 2 albums of any band that I can think of.
Spoiler, I'm not giving this album a 9.5. I do not hold this album in as high of esteem as I do those other two. So
Sure.
if anyone wants to fast forward for my score, I'll pause here, be my guest. But kidding aside,
I want to throw one other thing too out there
Sure.
as well, and it's that I don't think that Angra really had like a signature sound up to this point, because I think Angels Cry and Holy Land were different enough where like I don't know that there was an expectation so much for Fireworks, because like I always thought that Holy Land really felt like a more folky album than Angels Cry. Angels Cry felt like a really just like balls to the wall power metal album, and I think Holy Land kind of they stepped up the production and they kind of added more just more folky elements to it, a little bit more like different tempos and stuff. So like at this point in time, like this is a band that has 2 albums, so like who's to say really what their signature sound even is at this point? So I think this is this is looking through things, you know, with 2020, 2020 vision looking back on it. But at the time it was kind of like, you know, it's kind of insane to think that like Angra had only 2 albums at that point and an EP and an incredibly short live album. So yeah, like I just remember that the expectations were very high at the time.
Yeah, I agree with all that as well. They didn't have a distinct sound, if you will, and how could they? Because they had 2 albums that really don't sound much alike, both great for their own reasons. So this could have been the logical successor to Holy Land, or it could have been something completely different. The irony, though, is when you look at what the direction the band would take going forward, I don't know that they ever stayed to a single lane when it came to their sound. And I would say this, if you look at the most recent Angra albums, and I mean fast forwarding to the Fabio era, I would argue that the Fabio era sounds more like Fireworks than it does any other album. So it's kind of ironic because Rebirth and some of that Edu stuff is definitely a callback in certain ways to those first 2 Angra albums. But all the recent Angra stuff, it's not Angels Cry. It's not Holy Land. It's more akin to Fireworks, in my opinion. So in some ways, this 3rd album cemented the legacy 25 years later. It's really kind of nuts when you think about it, but at least that's how I hear it.
I also think, and that's a great point, but I also think that the last couple of albums have also probably been the most consistent as far as like sounding like
Sure.
it's similar, you know, like sounding like they have a signature sound. Like the Angra, the current day Angra has kind of been that way since the Secret Garden album. So I mean, to your point, I think that this is kind of like the you know, it took, you know, however many years, 20 years or whatever. And again, like this is a band that had a lot of personnel overturn and things of that nature. So it's understandable why like there would be a lot of changes. But like even those you know, I believe there were 4 albums they did with Edu. Like those are all very different sounding albums as well from one another. So I mean, it's interesting. It's also crazy to think that Andre Matos like recorded 3 albums with this band, and that was his time with Angra. It lasted all of about 5 or 6 years. Yeah,
and yet he will always be regarded as, or at least by me, as the hey, listen, it's the man behind the mic for the band, and Edu had a very difficult time, as good as he was, replacing a legend, right? And it's the same way that a lot of people look at Michael Kiske and they say he was the voice of Halloween, but he sang on 4 albums and 2 of them were not the same as the other 2. So it's a little ironic in many ways. But again, another reason for the comparison that I made earlier. But I am really looking forward to getting into this. And I guess we'll, you know, kind of just say Andre Matos, obviously vocalist and keyboard player. The twin guitar attack of Kiko Loureiro and Rafael Bittencourt, Luis Mariucci on bass and Ricardo Confessori on drums. the entire band would change with the next album except for the guitar players, because all three of the other musicians would go on to Shaman. And in many ways, Shaman was an extension of Fireworks as well. It had certain elements of power metal, but the songwriting was really more akin to Fireworks than it was certainly Angels Cry or Holy Land.
I always thought it was kind of more like Holy Land, just because there was a lot of that kind of like Brazilian folk sound to it that I think was mostly seen on Holy Land up to that point. But I get what you're saying for sure. And that's another album I think that we'll have to cover at some point. That's just one of those albums I just kind of forgot about, but that was another one that I remember it being very highly anticipated for no other reason that it was kind of like, the gamma ray sort of deal where, like, the guy, in this case, three guys were splintering off Angra, and it was kind of like, the other Angra, like what was this Angra going to do? So it's an interesting time. I didn't know this, but at least according to Wikipedia, there's not a ton of information about this time period. But according to Wikipedia, this is coming from Kiko himself. Matos had already decided to leave Angra after the Holy Land tour and to work on his solo project, Virgo, which is another album I think that we need to talk about at some point as well. But anyway, the band had started to rehearse with Edu as his probable replacement, which I had no idea was true. And then a French executive from the record company talked to them over dinner to help patch their differences. But even so, Kiko recalls feeling that Andre was distant, mostly working on his own compositions alone instead of collaborating with the other members. And this album is really all over the place. So I kind of, at least like musically, so I kind of that makes sense, knowing that background.
Yeah, it is. And in many ways, I think it lacks the flow that you have for at least those first two releases that just seem to be perfect in terms of the way that the songs were structured. That said, every one of these songs, with the exception of one, at least in my opinion, is really good. And surprisingly so, given all the turmoil that was going on behind the scenes. There's one song that I just don't really care for so much, but by and large, I'm a huge fan of this album. So much so that I think I had played Holy Land and Angels Cry so much back in the day that there was a period in the middle 2000s, 2010, 2012, that whenever I wanted to get my Angra fix, I grabbed Fireworks. So I've played this record a ton, and I think that that's where you and I differ a little bit. I have always loved this album. I don't love it. It's not a 9.5, but I would argue that 80 or 90% of this album is really good and wildly underrated. And I'm not sure that you listen to it as much as I did throughout the years, or at least it doesn't sound like it.
No, probably not. I can't think of like a time where I just was thinking to myself like, oh, I need to go back and listen to Fireworks. Like I would always go back to Angels Cry. Probably that would be like my number one go to for Angra. I mean, I gave it a 10. But yeah, and a lot of it was, I always thought that like this album Fireworks was lacking in like heavy hitter songs, the way that like like Angels Cry, like every song is like an all-star. It's like the all-star team of Angra songs. Like just every song. That's why I gave it a 10 in all honesty.
You can't find, I mean, your song of the week would change every time you listen to the album.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I can't even remember what my song of the week was for Angels Cry, because it could be any song on that album. I mean that.
I agree.
And that's what it takes for me to give something a 10, and why I've only done it a handful of times. I remember my perspective of this album going into this week before listening to it again was that it was two really great songs, bookmarking a lot of up and down stuff in between. I always really liked Wings of Reality, and I always really liked Speed. And in fact, I used both of those on mixtapes that I had made back in high school. Those were, at the time, my favorite two songs on the album. I thought everything in between was solid, but I probably used Lisbon on a tape too, just because that was like the big single from the album. Yep, I did use that I used that on a playlist as well. But like all the other songs, it just kind of like, I've kind of forgot about. Like, I thought Metal Icarus and Gentle Change maybe just were like a hair above the rest of the tracks as far as like what I remembered. But it was a few years ago. There was a video that was posted online. I believe it was recorded at like a radio station, and it was Fabio singing Gentle Change, in an acoustic setting. And it reminded me how great that song was. And then I noticed that they had played it on their recent, the recent big show that they did in South America, which I kind of alluded to at the end of the last episode. And that's that was what triggered me to want to go back and listen to this album again, because I like kind of remembered the songs like Paradise and Mystery Machine and Extreme Dream. But like it had been so long since I heard any of those songs, Petrified Eyes. So like that's really kind of what led to this. And being that we already spoke of the first two albums, it kind of made sense to just dive into this. And I'm glad we did, because like this was like a reawakening for me, getting to re-listen
rebirth
to this.
For you, despite the fact that we didn't even get there yet. But
yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned the title or the first track, Wings of Reality. I didn't realize that this was an Andre song, because when you listen to it, because of the speed and because of the I guess it's the closest thing to a quote-unquote classic song from those first two records. I always loved this song as a kid as well, and I think over time I really kind of grew to appreciate the other tracks as well. But this is a really majestic banger of a song, heavy on the orchestration, really a memorable chorus, mostly because of Andre, and I think he steals the show a bit there. The bridge actually did remind me of Holy Land, but then they go right back to business in terms of the structure of the particular song. The last 30 seconds or so, the drums are just absolutely insane. And I want to hear your thoughts, but I just kind of throw this out there. It's never going to happen. But how awesome would it be if all of a sudden Angra took the stage at Prague Power and they just opened the set with this song? I'd mark out.
I was thinking that as well. And that I was thinking that there's a number of songs on this album I would really love to hear live. I don't know that Angra really touches too many songs from this album. I know that
I've seen them play Lisbon in recent memory. But
yeah,
that's
and I think Shaman did as well. I think that Andre kind of took that song along with him in Shaman and as a solo artist as well. That always to me felt like the most well-known song on the album, and they did release a single for it. I don't remember if there was a music video or whatever, but I think that also that song came out like prior to the album, so it was kind of like the first. I think it was like the first taste of this this new album. So yeah, but yeah, this song just blows me away. It's such a great song. It's an awesome way to kick things off. It's got like that, to me, like it has that kind of like power and energy that you got from the openings on the previous two albums with Nothing to Say and Carry On. That was kind of, and it would continue on with the next album as well with Nova Era. Like they just like, they like opening up their album with like a real banger, like a real whipper kind of tune. And this is definitely it. I think it's the best song on the album. I'm not going to make it my song of the week though. And I'll explain why, but I think that this is probably what the Angra fans at the time were most hoping to hear out of the band. Just
myself included.
Yeah. Just, like it's just heavy. There's great orchestrations, everything about it. It's just a really, really great tune and a really great way to kick things off. And even though I feel like they kind of blew their load by playing this song first, I mean, I couldn't imagine another song starting this album.
You're right. The only thing I would say though is the difference between this and a lot of the other bangers, I think, speaks more to the album and its production. It lacks a certain punch that I feel like was there on some of the other releases that came both before it and after it. So even though this is a really, again, I'll use the word majestic power metal type of tune, because of the way it's produced, it doesn't come off as powerful as it might in a live setting or something like that. I don't think it sounds like a bad album. It just sounds different than some of the stuff before it. Again, almost like Chameleon, that it lacked the punch with First Time. Kind of a heavy song, but it just didn't sound heavy because of the way it was produced.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that. It's interesting, but yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I would be very happy to hear this song played live. It's just such a great tune. And again, I'll mention it as we go along. I think there's a number of these tunes that I think would be really fun to hear. Although I have to say, looking at like Angra's more recent set list, I'm really excited to see them in Atlanta. It's been a while since I've seen the band, so
I saw them twice this year, but I look forward to seeing them again. But no, kidding aside, I've not seen the recent set list. I'm thinking I might even not take a look just because I want to a little bit be surprised, but I'm sure it's going to be a little bit of what I saw, earlier this year.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, it's just a really nice mix of everything that the band's done, really. Maybe not including maybe some of the late era Edu albums, but other than that, like, just a lot of old stuff, a nice selection of the newer Fabio stuff, just a really nice set list. I have to say, like, I skipped them the last time they played at Prague Power. I was absolutely like,
really?
I was burned out. That was actually the year that I had kind of a mental break the next day, or the next 2 days later or whatever. But I just, like, for whatever reason, it was that year that they were doing that fan voted set list, and I remember you telling me, like, you had gotten wind of what they were playing, and you were like, it's not the best, like, it's not the best set list in the world. And, like, I in all honesty, like, I don't even really regret missing it all that much, because I feel like it's making me all the more excited to see them this time around. And I will not miss a second of this set. I'm super excited about it. Not to mention following Circus Maximus. I mean, that's going to be a really awesome, 4-5 punch, if you will, to finish off the first day of Prague Power this year.
No argument here. I mean, the reality is they played all of Omni that night, and then it was like a kind of a hodgepodge of greatest hits, but I wouldn't even argue it was their best greatest hits. It's like not what I would have selected necessarily, but even a bad Angra show in terms of a set list is going to be great, so I have no doubt you'll watch them again this year. I want to move on to Petrified Eyes and your thoughts on this, because you talked about, like, the Oreo cookie element on this, really yummy cookie, and maybe the cream filling not as great or not as consistent throughout. Talk to us about Petrified Eyes and your thoughts on this. What's interesting is the lyrics for this song were actually written by the producer, Chris Tsangarides, which, for those that don't know, Chris has been involved with a million albums as a record producer, sound engineer. He's British, obviously, by way of Greece or Cyprus or what have you. But he has worked with so many artists, including Helloween, Judas Priest, Yngwie Malmsteen, the aforementioned Gary Moore from earlier, and then a bunch of, like, pop artists as well, like Depeche Mode and Tom Jones. So you're talking about, like, a world-class producer who wrote the lyrics to this song, which I found to be really interesting.
And what Halloween album did he produce? Pink Bubbles Go Ape.
And now it's all starting to make sense, isn't it, my friend?
Yeah, it's so funny how we go in circles. This is an interesting song. It's amazing. Like, I just have these pockets of memories in my head of just, and they're all of Pat, like, singing a lyric of a song, and just him singing the opening lyric to this song, like when this first came out, and like just the way that Pat enunciates when he sings a song that he really likes, it makes it so it just stays in your head forever. Like, it's just a knack that he has, and I'll never forget that. I can't listen to this song and just not think of him. Like, he doesn't really sing as much as he just kind of yells lyrics at you. And that's kind of what it was at the time, but,
hasn't changed in 25 years.
No, not at all. It's a good tune. I like it. It's a little bit underwhelming after Wings of Reality, I think. I'm glad that it's not like another like banger right afterwards. It's kind of like, it actually is kind of like right in between Wings of Reality and Lisbon as far as like intensity goes. The chorus is killer on this song. But there's other parts of the song that I feel like are kind of boring. So like,
I'm so glad you said that. I completely and wholeheartedly disagree with you. And I love it. This is really, I had a feeling this would happen. I love the way this song starts with the guitars and what sounds almost like bells or a hand chime or something like that. It's nothing like the band had really done before. I think it was less folky and just more experimental than Holy Land. And it doesn't sound like a power metal song. It really sounded to me like something Steve Vai would have done on one of his albums. But at the same time, it picks up speed a little bit with some of the riffs. And I think the verses are great. Some of those high notes are fantastic. I don't think this is my favorite chorus by any means. I absolutely don't like the chorus, actually. And that's why I found this to be a really interesting exercise. But short of the chorus, I think the song is so good that it almost doesn't matter that it has a less than stellar chorus. Innovative drum patterns yet again. This is the type of song that they've been putting out more recently. Like, I could have heard this on Omni, or I could have heard this on the last album, and I think it would have actually fit very, very well. Despite the bad chorus, or despite the less than spectacular chorus, great song.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we like the song for different reasons, but I'll agree that it's a good song. It's interesting. It's the kind of song that, like, I feel like if they were to play it live, it would be, first of all, very shocking, but also very welcoming as well.
Yeah, but I would be very happy to hear something like this. Something we may, though, hear is obviously the first single, and you talked about Lisbon earlier, another Matos tune. This was a favorite of mine also when it came out, and I thought that iconic keyboard intro that is just so immediately recognizable still stands out to this day. It's the kind of thing that when they play it live, you know within 2 notes what they're playing, because it's just so simple but effective. When the band kicks in, it almost has a Stradivarius feel, and I'm wondering, I think they might have toured for Holy Land together in Europe, and I'm wondering if, like, hearing them night after night kind of rubbed off on them, because this has a Stradivarius vibe to me. It's a little bit slower paced, almost like a ballad, but the chorus is kind of heavy, faster, more symphonic. I wouldn't say faster, but I guess like just a little more powerful. This song even has a keyboard solo, which Angra didn't do a ton of because of the twin guitar tack that they were, kind of known for. This was the type of song they were able to push some boundaries with. And I don't know, if they get a lot of mileage out of it, even to this day. It's a solid tune. It's not my favorite song on the album by any means, but it was a good choice for a single.
Yeah, I love this song when it first came out. I got absolutely sick of it because I just felt like it was just, I don't know. It's weird to say a song could be overplayed because it's not like it was on the radio. So the only person I have to blame for that is myself, I suppose. But going back to it now after not hearing it for so long, it was really pleasant to hear it again. And it was a great choice for a single. It's kind of ballady, I guess. It's definitely, especially the chorus has a very mellow, emotional kind of vibe to it. But I think this song definitely still holds up. It's by far, I'm doing a little stat digging here, and I'm looking at setlist.fm. It's by far the song from this album they've played live the most as Angra. At least it's been recorded on this website that they've played this song just shy of 300 times, compared to the second most played song, Wings of Reality, which is at 91 plays. So
And that was probably all on this tour. I don't know that they've listen. When Matos left the band, I don't think they've been playing Wings of Reality since then.
no, believe it or not, they played it in 2013, 2015, and 2016
Really,
a bunch of times.
you know something? I'll give the band credit for that because the reality is Halloween hasn't touched any of that Roland Grappo stuff, and it kills me because there's so many good songs there. Kudos to them for. I mean, I guess the band held the rights to the song.
That said, Petrified Eyes has not been played since the Fireworks tour. I'll say.
Okay, but at least they touched Wings. In other words, I'll give them credit where credit is due, and the fact that they touched a Matos song, good for them.
Yeah, they played Metal Icarus as recently as 2 years ago. Gentle Change looks like they've been playing recently. So like. It's basically those four, I think, are the ones that have kind of remained in the lineup. Lisbon, Wings of Reality, Metal Icarus, and Gentle Change. There's a huge drop-off after that where it looks like all the other tracks from this album have not been played since the band toured this album.
And that often happens with time for albums that may not be the most, popular album of all time for a band. So I'm not surprised by that. At least they touched the album. If it was Camelot, they wouldn't go back to it. So, if
it was Camelot, they wouldn't play anything from Holy Land or Angels Cry either.
That's true. I no argument here. So, let's talk about Metal Icarus.
And they'd be phasing out the Rebirth songs as we speak.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's sad but true, I'm afraid. Let's talk Metal Icarus. The way this starts with those dual guitar riffs, it's another iconic start, but the song is... in many ways, it has what I'll call vintage Angra guitar solos with just fantastic verses. It's more akin to power metal, I think, than some of the other stuff on this album. And it's almost like Andre's telling a story with his vocal delivery. And I love the cadence to this song. It subtly changes pace throughout the song. I think it's really well done. It is... probably my favorite bridge on the album, and dare I say, so nice they actually did it twice. So this is a really cool piece to the song. Very ethnic or Brazilian sounding. Just an underrated song that doesn't feel like 6.5 minutes to me. Not my song of the week, but up there.
Yeah, this is probably towards the upper half of songs that I really enjoy from this album. I just think all the way through, everything about it is just the verses, the bridge, the chorus. It's all really catchy. I love the guitars are very like classically driven, especially at the beginning. This is a really good tune and one I hope that we get to hear live again. It's a really, really cool song. Just really, I think one of the more memorable tunes from this album and I think this is, where it kind of the heaviness kind of drops off after this, and the album kind of goes into like almost an easy listening experience.
Very reminiscent of Virgo, like you mentioned earlier.
And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's something that I noticed that there's a lot more kind of lulls on this album. If you're waiting for more Wings of Reality type songs, you're going to be waiting a while, probably until the album's just about over. But this is good. This is, I think, outside of Speed and Wings of Reality, it's probably the heaviest song on the album.
Yeah, and it's also the second longest song, and the only thing that would eclipse it is the next track, Paradise. It's another song that was kind of a collaboration. It was Rafael Bittencourt, Kiko Loureiro, and Andre Matos that wrote the music. Andre Matos wrote the lyrics to Paradise. What are your thoughts on this?
Way better than I remember it. It's kind of it's kind of like an unassuming kind of song, but it's really good. I don't know. The chorus is like really chill, but it has some of these like keyboard sounds that really remind me of Holy Land. It's like one of my favorite like mid-tempo Angra songs. It's just it's a really cool tune. I really had kind of forgotten about this song. This is probably the song that like I was reminded of. That was that was a really good song that may have, because of how many, like, I think the first 4 tracks were pretty memorable for me as a kid. And so like this is kind of the part where, you know, your teenage listening fatigue kicks in because, you know, 4 songs is, you're tired and ready for a taco at that point. So
although to be fair, I think you were always ready for a taco.
That is true, to this day. But yeah, I thought that this was a lot better than I had remembered it, and it was kind of fun going back and listening to it a couple of times this week. I thought this was at least underrated in my own mind.
This, I think, was clearly my least favorite song on the album. And again, it's just so fascinating to me that we have such divergent opinions. And I'm glad that you liked it. I really am. I'm not saying it's a bad tune. I'm just saying I like every other song more than this particular song. And I think
I feel the same way about another song.
I can't wait I look forward to hearing which one. You know, I talked about Stradivarius earlier. I so much prefer their song by the same name, which came out just a year or two prior to this. This is a kind of a proggy little tune. The drums, again, are kind of interesting. The riffs sound way different in terms of the guitar tone even than anything else they had done before it. It's just not their best chorus. It's a little bit dark. I don't particularly enjoy the instrumental section. I think they were kind of experimenting here, and I'll give them credit for that. But short of the nostalgia pop, because it's on an album that I do like quite a bit, I think it's the worst song on the album, and ironically, it's the longest. So I found that to be interesting. I think the album gets a lot better here, though. I think the rest of the album is really, really enjoyable, and I'll start with Mystery Machine. Big Scooby-Doo fan. Let me put that out there. So I wanna start by saying that I love this song. This was a song that got stuck in my in my ears all week long, and I found myself singing it wherever I went. I'd take a walk to the bathroom. I'd start singing it. Every time I was alone, I was singing the chorus to this song. I love the way it starts with the guitar riffs and like the wild drum fills. Catchy verses, really bright, full of optimism. I love the vocal delivery and the chorus, like I mentioned, just so infectiously catchy. The guitar solos are just wild and kind of over the top. And again, those drum patterns, solid bass lines. I mean, like, it really was just, as I'm going through the song, it was like checking off every box for me. And I did not think it was going to be my song of the week. Fuck it. It's my song of the week, Mystery Machine. Let's give it a listen.
And you would have gotten away with it, too, if it wasn't for those Snoopy kids.
Hold your arms to the sky. Don't let clouds hide the sun. Don't run away, 'cause you get high from fire. Cold sweat glistening on the ground. The rains will come crashing down. Man and voices sing out loud again tonight. The mysteries of life begin to unfold. Master of fate, you're the only one who knows. Machine of mystery rolls on.
Well, there it is, in a complete surprise, Mystery Machine, my song of the week. If you would have asked me when you picked the album what my song of the week was, I do not think I would have chosen this, but I fell in love with the song after all these years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I had messaged you earlier in the week, and I said Fireworks is not my favorite Angra album, but it has my favorite Scooby-Doo themed metal song on it. Not even. I would love to know if they even realized that this was the name of Scooby-Doo and the gang's van. But I'm with you. This is a really great tune. I think that it kind of gets forgotten kind of in the middle of this album, but everything you said is right on. It's super catchy, very memorable, really, really good. And I kind of even forgot like how upbeat it is, because I feel like it kind of gets crammed in between some of these like more mellow mid-tempo sort of tunes. So I think it's well placed. Great choice. I don't really have anything else to add. I really like this song too, and this is a song I'd be very happy to hear played live.
I would completely lose my mind. But that being said, I'm not going to hold my breath. Talk to me about the title track, Fireworks. Is this the song you can't stand? Because I feel like this is the one.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I can't stand it, but it's easily my least favorite song on the album because I just think that this is what I was talking about when I said this feels like easy listening. It's just very, very like ethereal and atmospheric in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily a bad song. I just think that it's kind of boring. I don't dislike any songs on this album. I just happen to think this is my least favorite. That's just my opinion. I would probably rate this album higher if this song wasn't on it.
I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, let me say that I used to agree with you. I used to think this was the weakest song on the album. It has this tropical almost vibe to it, like you're on an island or something like that. This was very reminiscent. You're right. I am. You're right. Although I can assure you that there's nothing to celebrate right now. But I can tell you that when it comes to Fireworks, this was something that really did remind me of the Virgo Project, and that's a really interesting experimental album that I'd love to talk about as well. You have the woodwinds, the gentle verses. I think some of the adjectives you used were spot on. I think the chorus is actually underrated, and it's a bit heavier and more focused as you get into the album. Believe it or not, I would love to hear this song live, and I think it would bring new life to it. But the reason that I kind of grew to like the song a lot more than I used to was because of the fact that there was the soulfulness in the instrumental section, a really good guitar solo, and the end of the song is just fantastic because it picks up dramatically, almost as if the quote-unquote fireworks are going off. So even though it's a little blah at points, and it's certainly a long song, it's the third longest on the album, the way this ends is so cool that I give it a pass. And I actually wound up liking it quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah, that's all good. Like, again, like, you know, it's nitpicking because it's Angra, it's the early days of Angra, and so like expectations are high, and so like, you know, I still think it's it's a good song. It's not a bad song at all, but I just happen to like all the other songs on the album a little bit more, or a lot more, depending on the track. But interesting that we have different least favorite songs on the album.
Yeah, and we often agree on that, but not here. And I guess that brings us to Extreme Dream. And the way I would describe this to somebody that hasn't heard it is if you like Judas Priest and you like Painkiller and you slow it down and you make it more Brazilian, this is how this song starts. Like, this is the intro to Extreme Dream, like Painkiller, but maybe it's not killing them. Maybe it's just like hurting them a little bit. The song itself is a little more mid-paced. Andre Matos' vocal performance is on full display. I like how they layer the vocals in spots. That's really cool. I don't think the riff is anything to write home about. I think the chorus a bit livelier. It's cool how they actually produce this, though, because depending on who's playing the guitar solo, it's going to go in one ear or the other. So I just like the way sonically that it came across. And the bass lines are really understated and very, very cool as well. I think this is a solid tune, a bit unremarkable, but again, a good tune as you get to the back end of this album.
I pretty much am right there with you. Everything you just said, I'm with you on this one. Again, it's like kind of a little bit, another one of those kind of like unassuming tracks, which I think there's too many of those on this album, I think, to put it in the same, you know, pantheon as the first two albums. But again, another solid tune, and all I could think of is this would have made a great tag team name if Jeff Hardy and Dusty Rhodes ever started a tag team together.
Yeah, I'm sure that is exactly what you were thinking, and we're way ahead of your time in that when this came out. But yeah, we agree on this one, and then we've got two left here with Gentle Change, the true ballad on the album, before Speed, which you talked about briefly earlier. What do you think of the ballad on this one, Gentle Change?
This is the song that you probably will be surprised to hear is going to be my song of the week. mostly because like this song had a renaissance for me. Like I mentioned earlier, from hearing that version of Fabio doing it live, and now that I'm like re-listening to it with Andre, it's just this really just nice. It's just a nice song. Like it makes you feel good. It's not really like a love song kind of ballad. It's just like almost like a kind of folky, chill, like I don't know. It starts out like really, really soft. You're really just hearing like the kind of like folky drums with the acoustic guitar and Andre's just unmistakable voice, and it kind of picks up a little bit of steam, but still stays like this kind of chill mid-tempo song. I would not have guessed this would have been my song of the week years ago, but I really like this song, and honestly, along with Wings of Reality, those are probably my two favorite songs on the album. But just to like, I guess, not be as predictable as I can be, I wanted to go a different route and choose this song instead. I would be very, very, very happy to hear this song live, and apparently they've been playing it this year, so that definitely bodes well. Great, just a great tune, and just a really it shows you that like Angra really can really write great songs no matter like what tempo they're at. Like it doesn't, they all don't have to sound like Wings of Reality. While I did say that, like, a lot of the song is kind of missing a lot of one banger after the other that the first two albums had. There's like understated seems to be the word I keep going back to. I feel like this one really has kind of more of a memorable feel to it. So I invite you to listen to a minute of the song, and I would like to hear some of your thoughts, especially kind of about like about midway through the song where it kind of takes like this almost stormy kind of change to it. So Gentle Change, there you go. So I will hand it off to you after we listen to Gentle Change, my favorite non-Scooby-Doo themed song from Fireworks.
Lighting up another cigarette, flame cool while cracking up inside. Saying night to people's lives, saying goodbye, laughing but wishing to cry. Gentle change of tides, upcoming days. Oh, the spirit of a new horizon fall in world dreams, far away from sight. So evil in the haze. Oh, spirit of a new horizon fall into world dreams.
This was a really good choice. This ballad, in many ways, at least for me, was ahead of its time. This is what an Angra ballad sounds like now, except they did it way back when. I think that the drums and the instrumentation especially is what you would see on some of these later Angra releases. It's such an easy listen, and it kind of lacks a lot of the balls that Angels Cry had, like we talked about earlier. But the band is known for great ballads. They started with them on Holy Land. They would continue with this one. I think the piano section is beautiful. This is an absolute highlight for me. I would be thrilled if they played this in Atlanta, and I'm not expecting them to. I know that they've played it. I just don't think they're going to. But again, stranger things have happened, and if they do, I will be there smiling ear to ear. Excellent choice, and I'm glad that you went outside the box for no other reason than I just think that this song deserves to be highlighted.
Yeah, go listen to Wings of Reality too while you're at it. Why not? But this I don't know. It dawned on me pretty early in this process that like this was kind of the direction I wanted to go with this. So there it is. Not to be outdone though, there is one last track, and it is called Speed, and I think this is an aptly named song because it's pretty speedy. It's I would say, other than Wings of Reality, it's probably the heaviest song on the album, along with Metal Icarus. I think those are the three real heavy bangers. Throw Mystery Machine in there too. I think those are like the four really heavy songs. Petrified Eyes has heavy moments, but also the whole first like minute of the song is not that heavy. I don't know. I think I'm just babbling at this point, but I always really liked this song, and I still do. I think this is like just one of those songs that would fit today's Angra if they were to play it live. Like it's a really good song, catchy chorus, catchy verses. I like the kind of Matos, like when he says speed, it kind of layers his voice saying it, which I think sounds really cool. I think if NASCAR is looking for a new theme song, this would be it. Great way to end the album, and I like the song quite a bit, and probably on a different day would be like a Song of the Week candidate, I would say.
I can't disagree. This has a gallop to it, a pace that's really, really fast. It's a memorable song with catchy vocal patterns on both the verses and the chorus. Slightly repetitive, but at the end of the day, I think it's broken up with a pair of wonderful instrumental sections where they really go heavy on the guitar and change the pace enough to make things really interesting. Very good song with a wild ending, and a great way to kind of really go out with a bang is the end of an era with Andre Matos. I'm going to go off script a little bit because we never discussed this. Did you have a chance to listen to the Japanese bonus track, Rainy Nights? Have you ever heard that song? Because that's how they end this thing in Japan, with a 5-minute bonus track, which is really another ballad in many ways. It has like a pop radio vibe with like an electronic drum beat. It's really different. It's kind of off-putting at first, but it actually grew on me quite a bit. Lots of strings. It's a bizarre tune that probably should not be on the album proper, so I think they made the right choice. But it's kind of cool, and it kind of grew on me as I listened to it over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I always had that Japanese version of the album, so I was always aware of this song. Oddly enough, it was released as a standalone single at one point. I don't know if
really?
I don't know if it was like a limited edition sort of thing. I'm sure Pat has it autographed by Kai Hansen or whatever. You know how he is.
Or unopened, one or the other.
Yeah. We have, we probably ought to tell this. I don't know if we ever did tell the story about when he handed the La Marche des Gendarmes Ed Guy single to Tobias to sign, and he was just like, holy shit, I didn't know anybody had this.
Or the fact that Demons and Wizards gets announced for Prague Power, and he's like, what do they sound like? And the album has been sealed on his shelf for 20 years. That is not a joke. I'm only exaggerating the time.
But the important part is that he still had it.
And it's still sealed. They played the festival. It's still sealed, but I digress.
Yeah, but I agree. It is very like pop radio. I'm surprised they didn't like break onto the scene and the pop scene with this tune. Just very like willowy keyboards and stuff. It's a nice little tune. Like, I agree. I feel like it would have been overkill to put another kind of softy kind of tune on the album, but it's a good tune, and it's worth checking out if you never heard it. The other track I listened to, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but on the Lisbon single, they do an acoustic version of Make Believe, which is a little bit, it's not a terribly heavy song to begin with on the original, but this one like really just goes completely unplugged and kind of has a little bit more of like, if you ever listen to that acoustic EP that Angra came out with, that I think was released in France, that had like a really probably one of my all-time favorite versions of what do they play on that one? Angels Cry and Never Understand. Just the acoustic versions of those are so good. And then there's kind of a Brazilian song that's sung in Portuguese in between those two. Really worth seeking that out. But this is kind of in that similar vein where it's just a even more chill version of a already chill song, but it's cool. And I remember seeking this out on Napster back in the day because I just wasn't gonna pay to buy the Lisbon single just so I could have the make believe acoustic version. So I probably am still listening to the MP3 I downloaded from Napster in like 2000 and 2001 or whatever. But
that stands the test of time. So
yeah.
God bless.
But just to be a completist, I wanted to mention that because I think those were the only two
Extra
B-sides
tracks
or bonus tracks that were recorded during these sessions.
I am so glad you picked this, and I had a lot of fun doing it, if for no other reason than I had a feeling we would have some difference of opinions here. Although I have no issue when we agree. It's just this is an interesting album. We both gave those first two albums incredibly high scores. What are you giving this on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm really curious how much you liked it. And also tell me what you think you would have given the score the day before you heard it again for the first time.
I've definitely been doing some waffling on what to give this. Honestly, I think that going into this, I was going to be surprised if I gave it higher than an 8. But I am giving it higher than an 8. I'm going to give it an 8.375. I think it's a step down, a considerable step down from those first two albums, but there's still so much to like on here. I just think that the songs that I'm not as crazy about kind of pull it down a little bit more. So that's kind of where my head is at on this one. I don't feel like I can give it any higher than that, but I was definitely kind of waffling between a 8.25 and an 8.5, and I feel like 8.375 might just be where it needs to be.
I thought you were going to be in the 7s, and I don't know why. Quite frankly, going into the week, I think I would have had you like at a 7. I think that's as like there's some good tracks, but this album loses me. So that's a better score than I expected. As I give you my number, I just want to kind of preface it by saying I really am trying not to look at this album through the lens of the first two albums, because when you compare basically any power metal album in the last 25 years, it's going to pale in comparison to those two classics, right? And I say that tongue in cheek, but not really. Those are two of the best albums I've ever heard. So I look at this album as a standalone piece of music and try to say, like, how much do I really enjoy this album, forgetting the noise of the first two, which make the comparison a little more difficult. I'm actually right there with you in terms of score. I'm at an 8.25. I think this album is great, and I think that if you listen to it straight through and you're expecting Holy Land Part 2, you're going to be really disappointed. Wipe the noise out. Listen to the album as a standalone album just for the music for what it is. And don't even think about who's playing the album, because if you think of it as an Angra album, you're also going to probably be disappointed. But if you think of it as just an album that came out in 1998, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. And I think that speaks to my score. So when it was all said and done, we disagreed on a lot of the tracks or the reasons we liked or didn't like certain tracks, but we got to the same place anyway. So this was a really kind of a fascinating journey and a great choice.
Fun little tidbit. We gave last week's album the exact same scores.
Wow. All right. There you go. So consistent, if nothing else.
Yeah.
I'm eager to give my album for next week, but I wanted to just mention a few news items and give you a little recap of my night last night. First and foremost, Queensryche going back out on tour this fall, continuing the Origins tour where they're playing The Warning and the self-titled EP. Really good show, highly recommended. They are starting in Spartansburg, South Carolina on October 9th, doing a run of shows through November 16th, where they're ending in Huntsville, Alabama, obviously known for their metal scene. But kidding aside, really cool tour.
Conrad Thompson will be there.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So Queensryche going back on tour, good for them. Another band that's going out on tour, and I mention this because they are celebrating their 15th anniversary of their debut album, Feel the Steel, an album we covered in the archives. Steel Panther going out on tour to celebrate that first album. They are starting their tour November 20th out here on Long Island in Huntington at the Paramount, playing a run of shows until December 13th in Orlando, Florida. Kind of cool, and I guess I'm partial to this one album because it got a little derivative after that. But an interesting little tribute show there. And finally, I went to see Foo Fighters last night, and I haven't talked to you about it. I was waiting to record. It was a mix of the best of times and the worst of times, and I'll tell you why. These guys put on a phenomenal show. Like, it reminds me of Pearl Jam, where it's like you have to go see them live. The problem was there were thunderstorms in the New York City area last night, and the show got canceled after half the set.
Oh, no way.
They played 10 songs. They made an announcement that there was storms in the area, and you could see lightning in the background. I mean, like, it was some ominous stuff. And they said, we're going to play as much as we can before they pull the curtain, and then after that, we'll try to get back on stage. So they went into Everlong, the last song. They played about 30 seconds of it, and then they pulled the plug, and they said that they couldn't play anymore. And the weather got really bad in the tri-state area. So I only got to see 10 songs, paid a fortune for the tickets, but it was really, really good. And the energy that these guys bring to their live show I've never really seen anything like it. I am dying to go see them again. So if they
Aren't they
play
playing
again,
tomorrow night?
they are, but unfortunately I have a conflict. Otherwise I would have probably kind of gobbled up tickets, although I'm sure that myself and the 50,000 people that were there last night all have the same idea. But damn, man, what a good show, even for the hour and 10 minutes that I got to see them.
According to setlist.fm, there was 11 other songs that they were going to play that they didn't have time to play. So,
oh God, that kills me. I'm not surprised, but and by the way, it's just a fantastic set list as well. So it's a true shame, but it is what it is. What can you do?
Yeah, dude, at least you got to hear Breakout. I think that is such an underrated Foo Fighters song.
It's awesome.
It's a great tune. Yeah, I'm just looking. I mean, I'd be thrilled just to see the 13 and a half songs that you did get to see, including what looks to be a very fun medley of tunes from Van Halen, AC/DC, and Black Sabbath and the Ramones.
So apparently the Van Halen piece, and I'll add this. Apparently the Van Halen piece was added just for last night, where they one of the guitar players just started soloing Eruption, which obviously is one of the most iconic intros or what have you. But the long and the short, Wolfgang Van Halen was backstage, and that's why they did it.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was a cool show, highly recommended. And I'll tell you this, and this was something I commented after the show. They are not the heaviest band on the album, but when they play live, they may as well be a metal band. And I say that because the energy and the aggression which Dave Grohl brings as a frontman, night and day compared to the album. There's a melody and a almost a pop-like quality to some of the stuff that they do, on the album. Live, I thought I was at a Metallica show. That's what it kind of felt like to me. So God bless. Great stuff.
Did you get to see any of the Pretenders?
I did not. I was getting out of work extremely late, and I was lucky that I made it for the beginning of the show. I did, but a lot of people were upset that the Pretenders even went on, because with storms in the area, people were just hoping that the Foo Fighters would have gone on early. But nonetheless, I know they played quite a while. I think they played about 14 songs during their set. I'm not really familiar with them, though.
Yeah, I know like a handful of tunes, but I would not have minded seeing them. I think that was a cool choice for an opener, much the way that Joan Jett was for Alanis Morissette.
And I think Mammoth played as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. Is that the same band that did Chris Jericho's theme song in WCW, or is that somebody else?
I think that's a different Mammoth, my friend. I think
I'm going to have to do a little research on that.
Different Mammoth. But looking forward to talking about something next week. I was kind of going through my list over here, and I actually have a number of albums mapped out in the coming weeks. And so I was thinking to myself, well, knowing what I'm going to do for my picks in August and some of my picks in September, I wanted to kind of do something different then, right? Like I know what's on the horizon. And I also enjoy when we go back and we listen to some of these albums from the 80s that I know you haven't heard, but I'm kind of a sucker for in many ways. And it was another chance to do a band we haven't heard. So suffice to say, an album is celebrating its 35th anniversary next month, but since I already have choices slotted, I want to celebrate it a month early. The band is Motley Crue, and the album is Dr. Feelgood. And I think this is going to be a really fun listen to go back in time at the heyday of Motley Crue in the late 80s, and when they were really just tearing things apart. So I don't know how familiar you are with Motley Crue, but next week you're going to get very familiar with Dr. Feelgood.
Very nice. I just went to the wrong Wikipedia page. Apparently there is a band called Dr. Feelgood, so not quite exactly what I
No,
was,
I'm not. We're not listening to them this week. I assure you.
That's too bad. I do know a couple of songs from this album. Kickstart My Heart, Dr. Feelgood, the title track. And I happen to really like both of those songs, so I think this is going to be a very easy listen. I always tend to enjoy these kind of hair metal, glam metal throwback to the 80s episodes. So I look forward to digging into this one, and then we will do a request the following week for August, and then I actually have an album picked out for the week after that, which I think you might be a little bit surprised about. So yeah, we are just kind of marching our way to Atlanta. We have 6 more episodes before we head to Prague Power USA, and then we will come back and do an episode like we have in the last few years, doing our kind of review of things. I think that it's pretty safe to say that we'll be attending all 4 days this time around, so we might not need to tag in to somebody else to cover some of it. But the summer is just flying by, and I've really enjoyed these last handful of episodes, and I'm looking forward to talking about the crew, and hopefully we won't talk about what Vince Neil currently sounds like live.
That's why we're going back and not doing a live bootleg from 2023, my friend, for all those reasons and more. Thanks to all of our supporters. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining our Patreon and for all the members there. Give us a like and a follow if you think we deserve it. It does help others find the show. We will come back next week when we talk about some Motley Crue. I'll throw some chairs around, drink a beer, and really, I think we'll enjoy ourselves when we take a trip down memory lane.
Sounds good. It's same old situation here at the Metal Exchange.
Have a good one, my friend.
Take care.